Hey, what up YouTube? Another video. Hope you enjoyed the last one. It's a Saturday morning. I'm just enjoying a nice cup of coffee here, and we're going to talk about RAW development and the image control effects on the Ricoh GR3 and the GR3X. So without further ado, let's talk about that. So we're going to switch the camera on. Now, as you're probably aware, all of you, I've got mine set up. When I press the jog dial at the top, the adjustment lever up here, I can get over to this quick menu, and my first item is image control. Image control sets various film effects or digital effects over the film. This is standard here, standard color, nothing too exciting about that, just a nice color profile. Then you've got vivid, black and white or monotone. You've got your soft monotone, hard monotone, high contrast black and white, positive film, the very popular positive film, and you've got bleach bypass and a retro look, HDR and cross processing. Now, all of these are effects that end up being baked into JPEGs. So if you shoot JPEGs, these effects are baked into the JPEG, okay? Now, if you shoot RAW, you will notice the screen is changing. I'll just focus on something over there. You'll notice that my screen is, in fact, in black and white, even though I'm shooting RAW. There you can see RAW is written up there. And that's because when you shoot RAW with a Ricoh and several other cameras for that matter, it embeds a JPEG, a smaller JPEG, into the RAW file. So you've got this big 24 megapixel RAW file that is only taken in RAW. So it includes all the color information that came through the lens and hit the sensor. But it also embeds a small JPEG file that's kind of like a thumbnail, a slightly larger thumbnail that lets you see the effect you're shooting in, okay? And when you scroll through pictures that you've taken, that effect is still there. Now, I'm just going to go and take a picture of a really colorful flower, and then I'm going to do that in standard mode. So I'm going to go up here and choose standard mode like that. And I'm going to go and take a picture of a flower that I will use for this demo. And the camera will only have that one picture on it, okay? Okay, so I've taken that picture now. Now I'm going to switch the camera on with the playback button here. You see the camera's off. I'm going to hit the playback button, and that switches the camera on in kind of viewing mode. Now, these image control effects, like I said, you can use those while you're shooting. But if you shoot RAW, then you can, say, switch to black and white to give you an idea how a scene looks when you shoot it in black and white, but the actual DNG file is taken in color. So all the color information is there. Not a lot of camera settings get baked into the RAW file, but some of them are. For example, the ISO you shot the image at, and the exposure. So if you're shooting on spot metering, highlight metering, or multi-segment metering, that gets baked into the RAW file. So if you've shot an image in, say, highlight metering, then that is in there, and it's not that easy to change, but I'm guessing that's the look you were going for. Anyway, some other features like sensitivity, they can be adjusted later. So all of the things that you can do with a JPEG when you're shooting with the image control effects, you can actually do those after the fact. So this image is shot in RAW, nice colorful image there. Now on the side of my camera here, and your GR and the GR3X. This is the GR3X today. I'm going to give this movie mode button a quick stab like that, and we get this menu up. Now, these are image manipulation tools that appear when you press that menu quickly. If you do a slow press on this, it activates the Wi-Fi. But up here, you can see these. If I try to do cropping on this now, I'll hit OK to try and go into that menu. You'll get an error message. And this says that this image cannot be processed. And that is because a lot of those tools work only for JPEGs. So you have to kind of do it in 2 steps if you're always shooting in RAW. Now, there is one menu item, this one, RAW development. Now, when we go into RAW development on this now, there are plenty of more options we can choose from. You can change the size of the image. Right now, it's saying if we save it now, save a JPEG from this RAW file, it will be saved in large, and that is 6000 by 4000. We can change the aspect ratio from the basic 3:2 to a 1:1 square. Okay. I'm pressing menu to go out of anything I select, and that menu, that goes 1 back. You can change the color space, might be good for printing or working working inside Adobe Lightroom. I don't know, I just keep mine on sRGB. One thing you can change even after you've taken the shot is the white balance. So this is the white balance menu. I shot this one on auto, and you can go in and change the white balance of an image after you've taken it, and you do that with RAW files. It can be done with JPEG files, but there is not nearly as much information in a JPEG that can be brought up to the surface when you're doing RAW development. So moving on, we'll just skip over image control. Image control is what you also use when you're shooting. We'll just skip over that because that's a really interesting part. We'll get to more stuff down here. Peripheral illumination correction. I'm not entirely sure what that is. It's either on or it's off, and it does seem to remove a little bit of vignetting when you switch it on. So if you take a look at this image now, you'll see the shadow appear or disappear. You'll see the shadow disappear slightly around the edges, like that. It might be kind of a lens correction feature, but I kind of like it being a little bit dark towards the edges. So I'm going to hit menu and go back out of that. This part, sensitivity, is exposure. So it's a bit like using the exposure compensation. You can go up a bit or down a bit to lighten and darken the image. Again, this is a RAW file, and it works best with RAW files. Going to go out of that, and we got noise reduction, which works in various stages: off, high ISO, medium, low, and high, or auto. I tend to leave that off. I don't really use noise reduction. Shadow correction. This is a little bit like dynamic range. If we go into this one here, if there are some shadows you want to brighten up, this will brighten up some of those darker pixels. You can see it doing its thing there. If you look beyond the flower and into the blurry background there, where the green leaves are, and then the edge of the sofa, you can see it brightens up that part a little bit. That takes it down, and this is off. So I don't tend to use that either, but you can increase your dynamic range a little bit. So that was most of the features there. All of these are applied to RAW files. Now coming up to here, image control, we shot the image in standard, so it's on standard now. In here, you can actually change the profile you wanted to shoot at. So you can go standard, vivid, and black and white. So now we're in black and white on this one. Going to go into black and white, but notice down here now we have the FN an FN symbol with the cog, and that means you can customize the effects of this black and white. Now what is really fantastic about a Ricoh, I'll just enter that now by pressing the FN button. What is really cool about Ricoh is you've got so much fine-grained control over what you do with this image. When you enter one of these image control features, now you can adjust contrast in the highlights, contrast in the shadows. You can adjust the sharpness. Toning is actually like a color filter you put over the final image. So if I put on, it's best to see this when I go from red to green. So now you can just about see there's a kind of tone on it. If I go to green, now you can really see it. Go back to red, you can see that. I never use that. This one I use a lot. This is the filter effect. This is like putting a piece of glass in front of the camera lens. You know, like in the old days with black and white photography. If you wanted to create some drama in your shot, you would probably put an orange or a red filter in front of the lens and attach that. Well, this one, this has 4 fixed stages, and they're numbered 1 to 4 across the bottom, and you can see the image change when I go in there. Now remember, this flower was it's a kind of deep reddy orange and yellow towards the middle. Now watch what happens when I move the yellow cursor over to position 1. See how it darkens that image up. Now that's because this is a green filter. So when you're applying a green filter and you're looking at something red and orange, it makes it darker. Colors that are green will come through lighter. So you got green, yellow, orange and red. And you can see each time I go up the scale towards red from yellow and orange, that plant gets even brighter because it's holding back, the filter is holding back other colors, but letting a lot of red through, making red brighter. And the brighter it gets, the whiter it looks when it's in monotone black and white. Now, notice again that while we're in this setting, the FN icon has appeared again. That means that you can go up here and press this FN button and see something else. So go in there. We are now on position 4, and it clearly states at the top now that number 4 is the red filter effect. And now you can see the individual settings for the red, green and blue that create that red filter effect in this mode. And you can actually increase the intensity of each of these colors by going up the scale. So so there you can see red is getting almost pure white. And the tick mark on the scale just to the left of the yellow slider is now indicating that that is the default position for this particular color. So if you play around with this, you always know where to get back to the standard setting. Okay, now these are available for all of the 4 positions on the filter slider for the green, the yellow, the orange and the red. So you can go about and really play around with these things and even make up your own. Just remember that you've made them up and you can reset them later. Okay, so that is how you apply various filter effects to a raw image after you've taken the shot. You can of course do it straight from camera while you're taking shots. If you run your camera in either JPEG mode or RAW and JPEG, then the RAW file, if you do RAW and JPEG, the RAW file will contain all of the raw image data that you can manipulate later, but the JPEG will take it with the current settings of the camera and it will bake those into the camera. So moving on, after the filter, we have shading. Now the shading is just like controlling the amount of vignetting. If you want to add some more vignetting, you go down the scale towards the minus symbol. So I'm going to go that way. And that increases the vignetting. So this scale is like, shading is kind of like fighting against vignetting. The more you increase this scale, the more it lightens up the edges of the image. I always leave that in the standard position because I think vignetting is it's reminiscent of older cameras that were lenses, and the film backplate didn't always quite match up perfectly, and it gave you that that kind of nostalgic shading around the edges of the image, and I kind of like that. Down here we have clarity. Clarity is contrast in the midtones. I must admit, I don't see too much going on. A little bit in the whites maybe. If you look right in the center of the image there, where that one big petal is framing a petal underneath, so you've got a nice mid-gray. Just watch this as I go up and down the scale. You can see it gets a little bit darker as I go towards the plus there, so more clarity increases a bit of mid-range toning, okay? A little bit of mid-range contrast, darkens it up a little bit as far as I can see. That was clarity. Clarity is one of the three things that could sharpen up an image, and those three are contrast, sharpness, and clarity. Okay, coming down here, if you like grain effect, if you want to go really old school, look at that now. I think you can see it. Now it's off, and now it's on all the way. There's some grain now in between those petals in the shaded areas. If that's your cup of tea, go for it. Not really my thing. I try to avoid grain. But that is how you adjust an image after the fact. Now, let's say I'm happy with all this now. I'm going to hit OK. And OK once more. OK applied those changes to the image. OK once more takes me all the way out. And OK now, you can see we'll now execute that and create that JPEG. Okay. And now I can, this is a newer feature of the GRiiX. Just have a mouthful of coffee. This is a new feature of the GRiiX and the firmware update that came out for the GR3, the firmware version 1.5 on the GR3, that now you get to press continue should you want to. So let's say you were making several copies of this one image out to JPEGs with several effects. You could just hit OK and keep on tweaking some of these settings in this image, and then process another one, and it says, do you want to continue or do you want to finish now? So if I hit finish now, we should see that I now have three images. The original I took in those deep funky colors, the second one I processed, and the third one I processed. And if you notice up here now, we've got an L. That means this is a large JPEG only image. That's a large JPEG only image, and that one is a raw file. Okay, now the other settings we could do, let's just select a JPEG here. Got to go back to the side of the camera now and press that movie button icon one more time, like that. We get that menu back up. Now you can see we've got these other settings that I can actually use. If I wanted to resize the image, I can. If I wanted to crop it, I can. So let's say I want to make a square crop of this one. I'm going to go in there like that, select crop. Now down here it says ADJ43. Now what that means is if I press the adjustment lever here up, or adjustment dial, that will take me to a 4:3 crop, and it won't apply it, it will just let me see it. So I'm going to hit that. That's a 4:3. It says the next one is a 1:1 crop square. Okay, so I hit that, and there you have it. That's the one I want, but I can also move this image around with the touch screen. Isn't that cool? So let's say that's what I want right there. I'm now going to say OK, or I can preview it by hitting the movie icon there, or the movie button. So now I'm going to just say OK. Data being processed, and this is now the fourth image. Now if I hit the display button down here, you should know by now that the display button will cycle through the amount of information on the screen. If I hit that, that's more information one more time, and you get the image all on its own. That brings you back to the start, more, alone. And then you can cycle through the images as well in that mode and take a look like that. So that is raw development and shooting with image control filters. Personally, I love the image control filters on a Ricoh. I've shot with Panasonic, I've shot with Fuji, I've shot with Sony. Yeah, that's about it really for brands. I've had several cameras, but those are the main brands I've used. Fuji are recommended and recognized for having good JPEGs, and they have good black and whites. Fuji tend to name their black and white simulations after film they used to produce, like what can you say, Across and things like that. They're just the same things as they are here, but I've got to say, I've never seen a camera with so much fine-grained control over the way it produces black and white images as this one. I prefer the standard black and white monotone image control feature on this one because it can do everything. The filter effect isn't on all of them, and this, the monochrome, the basic monochrome effect doesn't apply too much grain as default. There is no grain in the image. If you want grain, you can apply it, but there isn't. Some of the other ones do apply some grain. The high contrast black and white and the hard black and white do seem to be a little bit like Kodak Tri-X, and they do apply some grain as standard. I prefer the monotone, and I like to start with a basic monotone image and do my own work on it from there. So that's my video for today. Have a great Saturday, a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Peace out.